Hey everyone, Mr. DVB here. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing Doom Eternal, the sequel to the 2016 reboot of the Doom video game franchise. This was one of my most anticipated games of the year. If you guys watched my top 5 most anticipated games of 2020 list, this made it in right at number 5. I loved the 2016 Doom game. That is one of my favorite first-person shooter campaign games out there. I love the style of the first game, the gunplay, everything about that game was awesome, and this game looked like it was going to be offering even more, so it was a day one purchase for me, and I'm glad I picked this up because this game is a ton of fun. Now I'll start off by talking about the story. The story in this game is a lot more interesting than it was in the 2016 game. A lot of the background and plot, however, is told through collectibles you find, which was kind of disappointing. I prefer it when they actually tell you things straight up front, but Doom is a game that very much just throws you right into the action, so I can understand why they wouldn't, explain a lot of story to you as you're going along. Still, I didn't love the approach they took with just these little collectibles because you might miss a few and then you'll be missing certain gaps of the story. The game also kind of avoids the 2016 game as far as how it ended. It sort of just feels like Rise of Skywalker, where it starts with a completely different story and pretty much asks you to just accept everything that's going on, despite the fact that it wasn't entirely set up in the previous game. Again, not the biggest deal. This is a Doom video game. Most people only care about the gameplay. Now let's talk about that gameplay. The gameplay in Doom Eternal is further improved than it was in the first game in a lot of different ways. There is a lot more to the traversal in this game. It feels a lot more free-flowing than the previous one. You can choose up to 3 different abilities for your character that will change the way you move, catering to all different playstyles. If you're someone like me who plays a lot more aggressively, then you can choose to make your character play better in that sense, and I really liked the way they just allowed people to really try out all these different playstyles. You could probably replay the campaign and mix up your abilities, and it'll be an entirely different game just from the pacing standpoint, because it really changes how you play. The game also adds a lot of new platforming elements that were not in the first. You can climb up rock walls, jump into the air, and dash to another wall, maybe even swing on a metal bar across the way. These platforming elements were definitely the weakest aspects of the gameplay for me. They were fun at times, but at other times they could be really clunky and honestly frustrating when you're just trying to get from point A to point B. It was cool when they were incorporated into the combat, allowing you to kind of swing around the map and avoid enemies, but when they were there just for the purpose of being there so you could kind of have more of a thing in your way when you're trying to get to a location, it got annoying at times because I would fall off ledges when I clearly was, really close to grabbing that metal bar. So that was definitely an element that I wasn't a huge fan of in this game. Now let's talk about the gunplay for a second. This is the highlight of every single first-person shooter game, especially when it comes to the Doom franchise. I think this is one franchise that has honestly mastered the gunplay, and this game is no different. The guns are fantastic in this game. Just like the first, there are 2 different attachments that you can add to your weapons. These are special abilities that will allow you to blow up enemies or kill them in even different ways. They're very powerful, and unlike the first game, you can actually upgrade these attachments. So you'll be basically upgrading an upgrade to your weapon, and because of that, you can get your character to be very, very strong. And like I said, you can change these upgrades whenever you want, so you can really just play around with your playstyle a bunch, and it makes the game really fun and just fast-paced, which is something that the Doom franchise tries to go for. There's also ice grenades, regular grenades, and even a shoulder-mounted flamethrower that you can use to take down demons. All of these weren't in the previous game, minus the regular grenades, and they're all really fun and cool. The boss fights in this game I thought were quite underwhelming, to be completely honest. Most of them were actually just stronger variations of enemies that would end up showing up constantly throughout the game after you beat the boss fight. But the main boss fights that you don't ever re-encounter were average in my opinion. I mean, they were pretty generic, pattern recognition boss fights. They looked cool, and that was one thing I definitely liked about this game was, just the variety of enemies and how they all look very different from each other. But the boss fights themselves were pretty weak. Overall, though, gameplay was fantastic here, and I really don't have any complaints besides the slightly underwhelming and at times frustrating platforming elements. Now let's talk about the presentation. This game has great graphics. The first game looked really good as well, but this is obviously even better. I played this on the Xbox One X, so it was in 4K, and like I said, the graphics are fantastic. Details are very highly rendered. As I mentioned earlier, there's a wide variety of enemy types. There were enemy types being carried over from the previous game that now have updated models. When you shoot enemies, pieces of skin and body parts will actually fall off, so you can actually have a better idea of how much damage you're dealing to these enemies, something that wasn't in the first game, and I thought that was really cool graphically. efficiently, and also just it helped you know how much damage you were dealing. The game runs at a very smooth 60 FPS, I believe across all versions of the game, so even if you're playing this on a regular Xbox One or PS4, I believe the game is still trying to get that 60 FPS smooth feel, since that's something that the Doom franchise is known for. There were the occasional bits of frame rate drops throughout my gameplay sections, especially when I was being overwhelmed with a ton of enemies, but these moments were very few and far between, so it wasn't a big deal overall. The game features a wide variety of locations, whereas the first was set in only two, the Mars facility and Hell. This game jumps between a massive variety. You go to Earth, where demons are taking over. There's a spaceship. You can head to different planets. Hell, which looks quite a bit different in this game than it did in the previous one. All these locations just made the game a lot of fun. One of the problems with the 2016 game was that because there were only two locations, it did feel like it was being a little bit repetitive with always being in the same area. This game, you never really get that feeling because every place feels so different. So that was one thing that I definitely think was a step up from the previous game. The game overall is presented in a more arcade-like style that feels quite a bit different from the predecessor. For example, when you get a brand new weapon in the 2016 game, you might find a dead corpse and take it out of their hands right after ripping their arms off from their dead corpse, making your character feel even more badass. In this game, when you get a new weapon, you simply just see a transparent floating gun with flashy colors, and you'll just walk into it and all of a sudden, boom, you have a new shotgun or something like that. I honestly am not a big fan of this arcadey style. I know it's more in common with the original classic Doom games, but I just like that more kind of grungy feel that the 2016 game had whenever you're getting these new weapons. The same thing can be said about the ammo drops. When you kill enemies, there's going to be a lot of flashy colors, which it isn't a huge deal. I just personally preferred the presentation that the first game had, where it has, like I said, a more grungy feel. Ammo drops were just one color, and so on and so such, if that's even a term. The game has a great soundtrack, just like the first one. I love the soundtrack in the Doom games. It's very loud and heavy metal sounding, so you're going to be running around killing demons, and it just makes you feel badass. I mean, if you remove that music, Doom is a completely different game. It's not Doom without that music, and the composer for this game, whoever he is, did a great job. Great music. Sound design. This is one thing that I don't typically talk about in my game reviews. This is actually, I think, the first time I have talked about sound design. I thought it was honestly a little bit weaker in this game than it was in the first game, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because the first game, when you shoot those weapons, they have such an impact. It feels like there's definitely a lot of punch coming from those weapons. When you fire the shotguns, there's just this heavy amount of bass that makes, like I said, your character feel even more badass. These are things that just kind of pull you more into the game and just add to the feeling. This game honestly didn't have that same intensity and punch that the first game did. This isn't something that every player is going to notice. Most people probably don't even care, to be honest. It's just something that I kind of was a little bit disappointed by, because I just loved that sound design in the first game. Again, it's not a massive deal in the end. It's just a tiny thing I wanted to mention, but I thought I would bring it up anyways. In the end, Doom Eternal is a total blast from start to finish. The game is roughly 13-hour campaign, features intense gunplay, lots of just really cool variety in locations and enemies, and overall, a really damn fun game. I'm not going to bother talking about the multiplayer at all in this review. It's not an aspect that I care much for. It is weaker than the previous game's multiplayer. This time around, it's only 2v1. But it's not a big problem. I'm here to talk about the campaign, and the campaign alone was a lot of fun. I do wish the story was told a little bit in a different way, just not with as many collectibles that kind of tell you all the lore that's going on. But besides that, and a few little minor hiccups in the gameplay, I think this is a fantastic game. Should you pick this up? Yes, I think it's worth the full price tag. It's just a really fun blast. I mean, hey, with the virus going on right now, there's not much to do. So pick up Doom Eternal. My final score for this game is going to be an 8.8 out of 10. You guys can round that up to a 9 if you want, I don't really care. Great game overall, and a ton of fun. I do plan on reviewing a few other games that I played last year that I never got around to talking about, such as Days Gone, Death Stranding, and Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, so look out for those on this channel if you guys actually care, and I will see you next time, where I'll be reviewing whatever game it is that I play next. Bye.